Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing great out there in Appalachia or wherever you're tuning in from. Today, today we've got a huge one to talk about. Fallout 76's brand new update, version 2.112, which just dropped on October 21st, 2025. This thing is massive. Like, we're talking tens of gigabytes across platforms, and it's one of those patches that feels like Bethesda went through every nook and cranny of the game and decided to tighten up the screws, polish the corners, and rework some mechanics that had been long overdue for attention. So, if you've been wondering whether this patch is worth a download or how it's going to affect your builds, events, or day-to-day wasteland routine, we're about to go through all of it in detail. First off, let's talk about the basics. The scale of this update. On PC through Steam, it's around 42 gigs, which is huge, and that's not just filler space. Bethesda clearly bundled in a ton of underlying system fixes, graphical touch-ups, and optimization work. Xbox and PlayStation users got a smaller chunk, still around 20 gigs, but the content inside is the same. And that's actually one of the cool things about this patch. It's not a content drop in the sense of a new questline or new region, but it's a make everything feel better update. And those are sometimes the ones that quietly change the game the most. Now, the headline change that immediately stood out to me is the Cryo rework. This one's been a long time coming. Cryo-based effects have always been a little all over the place in Fallout 76. Inconsistent, sometimes bugged, and often just plain underwhelming. With this new system, Bethesda went back and unified how cryo damage and slow effects actually function. The short version is that every cryo attack now applies a consistent slow effect that scales based on damage, and that slow wears off naturally over time. It's no longer just a random chance or weird freeze effect that might stick or might not. And on top of that, slow-based damage now actually counts as cryo damage. This is a big deal for anyone who runs cryo weapons or perks that benefit from elemental scaling. It basically makes cryo a proper combat type now, not just a gimmick for freezing enemies. And yeah, it even ties in better with perks like Deal Sealer and those that check for impairments, because now cryo slow officially counts as one. So if you're one of those people who loved the cryo later or used cryo mods on your laser weapons, it's time to dust them off and give them another go. Speaking of perks, there's a surprising amount of movement here too. Some cards have actually shifted special categories, which doesn't happen very often. Good with Salt and Curator are now under Intelligence instead of Luck. That's going to affect a lot of builds because it changes how people balance their special points. If you were stacking luck-based cards and had these in your rotation, you might need to reshuffle your points or rethink your card spread. Night Eyes also got its cost reduced down to just 1 point, which finally makes it less punishing to slot in. Then there's Fast Fighter, which got a really interesting rework. Before, it just gave you a flat boost to reload and movement speed. Now, that movement speed boost actually converts into reload speed when you're using it, meaning there's a more dynamic interaction. It's even more noticeable if you're running weapons like the black powder rifle or pistol that always felt clunky. It smooths that out just enough to make them a bit more practical in active combat. Another small but important tweak is to Deal Sealer, which now properly recognizes cryo slow as an impairment. And poison aura effects now flag correctly so they trigger the perk as intended. Bethesda also did some maintenance passes on things like Life Giver, 4-leaf clover, and how mutations like Twisted Muscles interact with Class Freak. Basically, there's a bunch of small quality of life corrections to make sure perks and mutations talk to each other the way they're supposed to. You know those weird edge cases where your crit meter wouldn't fill properly, or a perk wouldn't trigger when it clearly should have? A lot of those seem to be fixed in this patch. Now, the next big piece of the puzzle is events. Specifically, Decryption and the Big Bloom. These two events got significant tuning. Decryption used to be kind of inconsistent in difficulty. Some players could blast through it like it was nothing, while others would get shred by high-level enemies because of how armor penetration scaled. In this update, Bethesda has reworked that entirely. They removed armor penetration but increased enemy damage overall. That makes fights feel a little tougher, more deliberate. You can't just tank everything endlessly now, but at the same time, you don't get instantly melted through your power armor because of a stat quirk. It's more predictable and fair. They also adjusted enemy spawn levels upward to make it more engaging for high-level players. And then there's the Big Bloom. If you've played that one, you know it's fun, but could feel a bit undercooked. No pun intended. Beelzebub, the event's boss, got a serious buff here. His health and damage output have been increased, and they've also made performance improvements to the event as a whole, which should help prevent lag spikes when everything starts exploding with toxic pollen clouds and particle effects. The loot drops also feel better now. It's not like a total overhaul, but there's clearly some tweaking behind the scenes to make sure you're rewarded for the effort you put in. They even fixed localization issues in Mischief Night and Mothman Equinox, which, while minor, shows they're still paying attention to seasonal and limited time events. Combat and general gameplay fixes are another area where this update shines. One of the most annoying things in the game has been how often Scorch Beasts would spam their scream attack. They finally addressed that. Scorch Beasts are now much more balanced in how often they use it, so you won't have to listen to that piercing screech on repeat every few seconds. It's a small sanity saver, but honestly, a welcome one. Another fix that I think will make a lot of people happy is how Nuke Silo mainframe cores now properly take explosive damage. Before, you could throw a grenade or use an explosive weapon and it would barely register. Now it actually works, making certain builds way more viable for silo runs. And for those of you who love running with fall damage immunity gear, there's a great change there too. You're no longer forced to rely on power armor for it to work properly. The immunity now functions outside of power armor, and it also prevents that weird stagger effect that would trigger even when you didn't take damage. It's smoother overall. Radiation damage has also been cleaned up a bit. It no longer automatically recovers when you load into a world war of pod, though it still does on respawn. This change keeps things consistent and also interacts more cleanly with the Glow for Ghouls mutation. Now let's talk about C.A.M.P revamp improvements, because this is one of those areas that's quietly shaping how everyone plays. The C.A.M.P system has evolved so much since the game launched, and Bethesda's been refining it for months. This patch brings a mountain of improvements to building and customization. The workshop menu got a noticeable upgrade. Blueprint management is smoother, scrolling through categories is faster, and there are fixes to how variants display. You can now use FreeCAM wiring more reliably, which is huge if you're into detailed base building. A bunch of items that were invisible or had clipping issues got fixed as well. There are also some crash fixes and performance boosts tied to how C.A.M.P assets load when you fast travel in or out of a base. That might sound small, but if you're a builder, you know how annoying those moments can be when a piece won't snap correctly or the menu lags while switching categories. The new system feels way more fluid, almost instant. They've even fixed an issue where some players' blueprints wouldn't load or would revert when switching servers. So, overall, it feels like the revamp is really starting to settle into its final form. I think this is going to make a lot of players who focus on creative building really happy, especially with how much smoother and faster it feels to get things placed just right. Beyond all that, there are dozens of smaller fixes and balance tweaks that collectively make the game feel cleaner. Vendor inventories were adjusted. For example, the Robo Butler Collectron and the Cosmic Knife vendor errors have been corrected. You'll also notice fewer instances of incorrect item names or missing icons. Some older textures were updated, particularly around certain armor and weapon models that look dated compared to newer content. And they've improved lighting and VFX in some areas, especially when it comes to environmental effects like mist, fire, and radioactive zones. There's even mention of a rare loading crash being fixed, which is one of those invisible but crucial improvements that keep the game stable long term. If we zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, Update 2.112 really feels like Bethesda's way of saying, we're not done refining this game yet. Fallout 76 has had a long, wild history since launch, and this patch shows they're still dedicated to smoothing things out, improving core systems, and responding to community feedback. They didn't have to rework cryo effects or move perks to new categories. Those are the kinds of changes that come from listening to players who live in this game every day. And the scale of the patch, especially on PC, tells me they touched a lot more under the hood than the patch notes can really communicate. There are probably performance and backend improvements baked in here that will help future updates roll out more cleanly.